So welcome to Transform Gov, where we share real-life stories about how data and technology are changing the way public services are delivered, designed and experienced. In every episode, we go straight to the source, that is, the leaders making the calls and the teams getting it done. Transform Gov is part of the Ireland eGovernment Awards, and it's brought to you in partnership with Accenture. And I'm Maeve Neefsey. But today on Transform Gov, we're stepping back a far way to see what's come in the past and where we are today. That is, what's happened with transformation since we first started the awards, which is over 23 years ago. Because I think we'll learn a lot about what transformation is like in the public sector just by looking at that. From form filling online, if you remember those days, to redesigning the entire public service around people's lives. So joining me is Declan Tuitt, who you may know as the head of the judges for the Ireland eGovernment Awards. And Declan is also a lecturer with DCU School of Communications. He's going to help me unpack 23 years, Declan, of digital transformation, all the entries and what it tells us about what's going on. So you're very welcome, Declan.
Thank you, Maeve.
So look, let's just take a step back. Do you remember the first days? Remember when we first started the awards and the entries that came flying in? And by the way, all by paper and post.
I do. And what I remember most distinctly was I think it was just the wonder that a government department actually got something online. Mm-hmm. And everyone was so impressed because the impression was always that government departments, public service were so dust-laden that this would never happen. And the initial sort of brochure sites with pictures of a Lord Mayor in his finery or a mission statement from a minister or something proliferated, and they didn't do a lot. They just told us stuff.
Business, sure they weren't. They were just about promoting.
They were just saying, we are here. And here maybe is an email address, but still like go to the counter and go to the phones, but we're actually online. And when you consider who was there, most of the senior civil servants time, they weren't born into this. So this was, why would we? What's it going to do? Is it going to benefit? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is it a real thing? Or at that stage still, okay, we were past 2000, but it wasn't a phase, but there was still a little bit of wariness about sort of,
well, technology was for doing things behind the office, weren't they? At the back end.
Yeah.
I mean, is that what you remember from it?
And also that the serious stuff was done differently.
Hidden,
yeah. And I think that's one of the big changes we've seen over the years, that we got a little bit of sort of brochure sites initially, some interaction with the public, mainly taking fines or taking license fees or something like that online. But then moving to something that it's just part of everything. And it's not this distinction of, there's that funny electronic bit or that funny computerized part, whereas now it's just everywhere. And I suppose we expect that now, 20 odd years later.
I mean, people do forget very quickly, don't they? What it was like before. I mean, firstly, if you just think of the world around it, our awards, the entries were done by post.
Yeah.
We had to go out and do all the promotions by post. We had that time we were partnered with Public Sector Times, and they promoted through the Public Sector Times the fact that the awards actually existed.
Which was a print.
Which is print. So, everything was just very, very different world. And then we used to get phone calls from people saying, when's the deadline? Because, of course, we had a website, but they didn't necessarily think to look there. And then the other one was that we'd get phone calls from very, very senior people in the public sector saying, did we win? And we'd say, we can't tell you. And I didn't know because I wasn't a judge. I was facilitating. So, which is good. I shouldn't have known. But it was a different world. But then we moved on from brochure sites to, I remind you of one of them, right?
Okay.
2009, Department of Social and Family Affairs, as they were then, they won under the website accessibility heading.
Okay, and that was a time when accessibility had quite a tight meaning. It was really about getting a AA or a AAA, making sure the declarations were right on page. It was quite a technical exercise.
Yeah. And
the overall spirit of it, the inclusiveness of it, and the ideas now of what we'd call universal design weren't necessarily there.
Hang on, but people probably have forgotten. WAI, wasn't that right?
Yeah.
It was a kind of a checklist, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And you had to use certain kind of fonts, I think, or was it certain kind of colours and content had to be a certain way?
You still have web-safe colours, because that still works for people with dyspraxia and dyslexia. So there's still some of the core ideas are still there, but this idea of what's accessible, it moved even from then from being, okay, it can be read by a screen reader, which is great. Because all bots are screen readers now, so that's great. Had the benefit that if you had an accessible website, it went up to Google rankings because, guess what? The Google bots were bots. Yeah. And so there's an actual other need other than just, being inclusive. But this idea of inclusivity and universal design moved beyond that to multiple languages.
So if you think about the interview we did recently with Aoife Prendergast from TUS, who won the universal design, as you say, which was accessibility, but now what's so different?
It's not seen as a checkpoint, and it's even getting beyond this idea of sort of user experience. It's trying to get everyone included as far as possible. So it's not just, I need to have certain fonts, certain sizing, certain bits of code there to make it accessible. I now need to think of what are they actually trying to do, who's coming there, and it could be a language barrier. It could be some other type of barrier that isn't, say, just a site barrier or a motility barrier. It could be just that they can't get to certain places at certain times, but they can only access on a phone without broadband and without Wi-Fi. Yeah. So what do you do there? So, and also to try and let the site, app, whatever the system is, do what it does well. But the big message I'm seeing now is, if it's better with a real human being, we'll get the real human being, and we let the site do what it does.
Yeah.
You know?
But I suppose it's like that 360 degrees, isn't it? That you walk in the shoes of your user.
Yeah.
And then you say, okay, what is the way in which we could make that experience?
A lot of it now isn't even like, there was a good bit of, say, user testing early on. Now it's actually often like proper co-design. The real target group are there from when the initial project gets off the ground, which makes a huge difference. So it's not someone predicting what you'd like or saying, oh, best practice says this. We actually ask you, because that specialised group are in a certain country at a certain time and have certain educational attainment, and that's not universal. So it's that idea of bringing someone along the journey, and then often also being open that in 18 months, we have to look at this again. It's not a thing you end. It's a process you just engage with as business as usual.
Yeah, I suppose it's now, which we've forgotten, but the past, it wasn't our main channel of communication, whereas it is now. So it becomes the most important channel, and you have to make sure you're evolving all the time.
Particularly now, it's in our pocket.
Yeah.
We don't have to go to a special place. I even remember the early application that's saying how accessible it was, because you could go to the local library and log into a computer there and use the internet there. And I go, kind of, So this idea of that, it's we're basically cyborgs. We all have this thing in our pocket.
But let's go back then before we go forward on the cyborgs. But I remember we moved on, really, didn't we, from brochure sites?
Yeah.
Although, when I talked about the Department of Social Affairs, Family Affairs rather, it was revolutionary just to put their content up there, okay? Citizens information. Do you remember that was a big, huge wow? Yeah. They put everything in plain English and in consistent formats. And that's still a great service, actually.
Well, a lot of them got the idea that once you go online, it's no longer cutting and pasting a policy document from inside the organisation. You're actually talking to an audience. So you're getting into broadcast, you're getting into publishing. It's not just, here's a PDF of the document that's written in, part legal, part civil service, in speak, with lots of, terms that an average citizen wouldn't get. Actually thinking, who am I talking to? Are they a 17-year-old trying to go to uni? Are they a 65-year-old trying to, look at their pension? What are they doing? But that next phase was, first of all, the brochure sites came along, and then they got revised into appropriate language and styles and appropriate lengths for online. And then we got into transactions where we could actually do something. I could buy a license, I could pay tax, I could do something like that. Do
you remember we were talking about online applications? Like that was a mega one, wasn't it? Forget about transactions. You could actually, you could apply for something.
Oh, you mean I didn't have to just go online to download the PDF to print it out to send it in by post?
You could interact.
I could actually send my information in straight away. Yeah. That made quite a difference. All right, and because we were talking previously about the accessibility thing, there's a whole bunch of people who this worked for perfectly, but still the capacity was still in the background for those that weren't born into this and might need a phone call or might need something else. So it was getting that balance right, and that was the hurdle in mind more than in technology, in that it might be very efficient to do something online, but it's a case of, is it effective for all the people? Because it's public service. You're trying to hit everybody as well as you can.
And do you remember particular ones that kind of represented that?
Oh, well, I remember
that online form stage.
I remember the smaller ones. There was things like, they might sound smaller, but it wasn't like going on to Ross and getting your taxes done in year. It was like being able to get your dog license without having to queue, without having to come back and forward. Those little ones, and what I found interesting in the first stage, a lot of the county councils jumped and got small things, bin charges, whatever they are, but every day, things that are embedded in every other month, you know, something rolls around and it's July, it's not Christmas when you do this charge or you develop that. And they were the ones that sort of got me and said, no, that's everyday stuff. That's not I have to look at my online taxes once a year, or I have to do my medical claim or something that happens once every so often. These are things that affect you every day.
Yeah.
And they were now just happening online.
And do you remember any particular ones that we got applications? I think there was one about forestry applications, wasn't there?
Yeah. That was great because you could now do it all online.
What was that called again? I think it was iForest, iNet. Is that correct? Yes, it is. So, it is. Yeah, that was 2010. They were a winner. Yeah.
But that's already sort of halfway there.
Yeah.
In timeline. But, the difference is that took care of itself. And it was one of the things that the initial eGov, when they started doing nice transactions online, and it meant you could do it from where you were. And often, especially something like forestry, you mightn't be in Dublin.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Dublin still seemed often the centre of the universe for many, many things, even though there are offices of certain departments around the place, but it's still Dublin a lot. So that really worked. But also, it was quite isolating that it was just its own at the time. You know what I mean? We did this one bespoke application and one bespoke way of interacting with the potential customers, but it just stood alone. And it wasn't necessarily repeated across lots of different places that could have a same type of interaction.
And I suppose in the background, working away, beavering away really early on was revenue. And they won quite a lot of the awards at the beginning, if you remember, just in terms of tax and submitting your end of years. So they really were trailblazers. Now, what was interesting, if I remember rightly, is that the teams at that stage early on, you didn't have the IT expertise within the department itself. Although there were some people, you relied heavily, I think, on external teams. I mean, people still do. But I think that's changed quite a lot.
Well, they still do, but it's also, you couldn't have had the expertise there. Because I remember, I'm coming from a uni background, that the degrees were only getting set up in 99, 98, that sort of time.
You mean the computer science?
Well, no, the computer science was there earlier.
Yeah.
But the actual degrees that would be thinking about the front end.
Yeah, programming, universal design.
Those sort of things. You know what I mean? We had people who could run a server, do programming language, but there wasn't that sort of spirit of, well, this is where it comes together for the user. And those degrees, they only got settled really late 90s. So there weren't people with 10, 12 years experience who could lead teams. So they had to go to industry and get advice or get some type of consultancy to see what is this thing about? Because up till then, everyone had been told it's form R64J, and that's the one we use. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I do remember, though, that at the beginning, again, remember we were getting all the entries in by post, and then it went to email, thank God. And then we had, there was no repository, so you had to download all the attachments and all the rest.
Excel sheet.
There was an Excel sheet, that's true. But then the other big change for us was getting entries in suddenly was much easier, because it became shifted from that over there stuff, far more centre stage. And the variety of what people were doing online was getting greater and greater. And of course, if you remember, the Taoiseach started coming to present the winners with their trophies. So we realised there's definitely a shift. But if you think about things like, were there other projects that stood out in your mind that started to move forward quickly? Or more advanced, I suppose?
More advanced. It was just after people started doing the transactional stuff, the licensing, the paying tax, all that. And we could see that these now were reliable, that people started trusting them with like that level of information. What I found interesting was the next stage sort of was like about sort of the completely invisible stuff that most people wouldn't value because you can't see it, is getting things to talk to each other behind, whether it's departments or state bodies, sharing and working together. And also this idea that now they'd start putting sort of, I remember there was a space where we had a really big set of entries around heritage and things like that. Suddenly they start investing in heritage, tourism, cultural events, things like this, that you go, oh, that is actually part of all this. It's not just getting money in from revenue. It's not just the license here. It's not just applying for a grant. Oh, that's the wider remit of what we do. And now that's online in a different way. And what I start seeing is, there was the functionality and stuff, but then things got richer. We started including other formats than just text on a form. It started going to video, audio, wider formats, better photography, better looking sites, all this sort of stuff that made it rich. And so the government sites and state body sites no longer looked like, oh, but it's a government site, or oh, it only functions like that. Instead of they were on par with everyone else. They looked as good, functions as well, downloaded as quick. They had as much thought about the end user experience as you would from any commercial site. And it wasn't siloed off anymore.
I'm going to take a quick break now. Sorry, Declan, because I just realised we haven't given a word yet from... Have we given a word yet from our very important partner, Accenture? So we're going to take a quick pause and give a word from our very important partner.
Through the power of cloud, data and AI, Accenture is helping the public sector by blending human ingenuity, technology and a delivery-focused culture to turn their ambitions into action. Be ready for any challenge by adopting a continuous reinvention mindset to deliver human-centric services that adapt and grow with your needs. Contact the team at Accenture to find out more.
We're back. And we're just talking about, again, Declan and I, Declan Chute is the head judge for the R&D Government Awards, because we're about to open it for entries very soon. On our retrospective, we were saying there's been different phases, I suppose, in terms of transformation, where we started with the brochure sites, and then you started to talk not just about the online transactions, but also about kind of information being connected. So kind of trying to have the APIs and open data. Was that a phase you think came through?
Well, yeah, the open data became huge because it also signaled sort of e-gov sites and that were about participation, not just getting a service or a transaction. It was about something else. They're actually getting towards more ideas of e-democracy in that. And firstly, through just getting information out there so people could be well informed. But then there could be proper feedback. There could be proper tracking of what's going on, as opposed to, and proper transparency, which makes a huge difference then. Here's our brochure and this is what we tell you. Did you know that sort of way? So that started changing quite a bit. But I also found then that different, say, a county council, a university and a state department might get together and start cooperating. So the little silos were beginning to break open as well, so that while people...
I think we have to remind people that there was actually kingdoms in departments and organisations. Well, there were fiefdoms where, if I'd be talking to, for example, it could be a CEO and he'd say, oh, that's our stuff. This is our stuff over here. We own this and that. We are going to build up our own. Everything from scratch is ours, which is absolute nonsense, of course. But the world has changed, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and technology enabled that. But that was a psychological change.
That was quite a
because we did our first cross-organisation collaboration award category. We had to scramble to get people to enter. Now it's probably our biggest category. It's
just become normalised. But also, what it also exposed the interesting thing that you might get 5 entries from similar type of departments, doing similar type of projects, and you think to yourself out loud and you say, oh, hold on, surely that the main technology or the main process is the same. Why isn't it shared if it's all public money in that? And then it was brought out that it would be good if people shared expertise or shared a budget, because I can bring this thing, both county councils can share that resource now. Everybody's doing better. And once that sort of got brought out, people see the sense in it instead of my fiefdom. But it did have to be sort of, a light needs to be shined on it that this is actually a better way.
I think also, if I remember rightly, there was EU legislation and a digital strategy that then, informed our national strategy. And that was a big change, actually, having a digital strategy, because we didn't have one. That wasn't that long ago. And then suddenly, the Department of Finance was driving a digital strategy. Then everybody had to try and say, well, what part do I have to play in delivering the strategy? But then the EU were also looking to say, we have to have a certain minimum requirement. So there was a big shift, really, in terms of how we saw digital and its role that it played with the citizen.
It also was one of those sort of unifying ideas that went across departments, state bodies or whatever, that it wasn't my little fiefdom and that's my budget and this is what I do. And I have to implement some rules or some legislation, whereas it was more a mindset, look, everybody's involved and these can affect the whole of the country, not just my little department. I think that's quite the change I've seen. It's probably the biggest one that people are thinking outside, or you might have somebody now, I can see there's certain people who they'd have worked in one department for 5 or 6 years, 8 in another, 6 in another, in sort of technology roles or services roles or whatever. But those skills and what they bring is all about thinking about how to make the citizen's life better. It's not a specific technical role or a specific managerial role that just can only work in that department. And that's what I'm seeing is different now, that people are thinking of, oh, we're doing something for the citizens. I just happen to do it in this department or that department.
Well, that's actually a whole big other change. I think you're absolutely correct in terms of the culture. Is that, when I was younger, I think we saw, the civil servants saw us as people who were trying to take things from them in terms of money. That, do you actually, have you a right to that benefit?
Yeah.
Whereas I think it switched, the culture switched in, what does the citizens need? And it's our job to make sure that service is flows and that the citizen is put at the centre of things rather than this kind of more combative, I suppose, relationship. And that reflected the way the services were being rolled out online.
Yeah, it is that mindset of it's not an us and them thing, and also because everything was far more transparent. You could see online what was going on. Things could be tracked.
Yeah.
Budgets could be put together. That was just more open than it ever was. Even like something like the Open Data Portal with literally thousands of pieces of data and information that was paid for by taxpayers one way or the other.
About that. Remind people.
Well, we actually led Europe for quite a while in this, and that Ireland decided, well, if data was made, now it could be CSO data, but it could also be education attainment, it could be waiting lists in the hospital, you know what I mean? The big raw data, the big numbers, cleanliness of water in a bay in Kerry, whatever, they were published online and available for everybody. And one of the hopes is that people might do something with it and, make a new business or make a service better or something. But also the bigger idea was this idea of this transparency. This was our data and it was out there. You didn't have to go and apply for it anymore. It was available. And that was quite a change because for a long time in Ireland, if you wanted to find out something, there were 4 forms to fill in, a waiting room, and maybe you got access and you might be able to photocopy or something. But this was a big change in an attitude of, well, okay, the public paid for it, they have the right to access it. Do you know what I mean? So, and they might use it for something to make their business better, make their daily life better.
Or in fact, the public service might share the data between each other through that repository as well, so to add value to what they already do and break down some of the barriers that can happen between different organisations. What people forget as well is the legacy systems that were in the different departments and local authorities right across semi-state and state was a big problem because it kind of stopped.
Well, they couldn't talk to each other. I might get the number wrong, but I remember at one stage before the HSC got a lot of the systems working together, I think there was 32 different boards and I think there was at least 6 different core programming architectures in them. So they were never going to be able to talk to each other until we decided sort of, let's go for more web-based, more open architectures because you couldn't get that computer to talk to that computer. Even though you might want to share databases, it just wouldn't happen. Beyond the silos, beyond that's my budget or that's my territory, everyone develops small systems on their own. And it is that thing of now people are saying, look, it's a relatively small island. We should be going for some type of standard that we can share, we can communicate, and it's not our data. I think that's the big mind changer thing. It's in service of making the life better of that person there. And
do you see many entries around open AIs or API accessible integrations? Do you remember that kind of stuff coming through?
I do. With the last couple of years now, there's been the initial start of people sort of using AI for do things like translations, and they're not just make it more efficient and quick. They're actually models they've sort of put a ring fence around and worked with and even outside jurisdictions. Say, I'm thinking about Irish language with bodies in Scotland as well as in Ireland working together on getting the translations right. And this model that's sort of, it's not just a quick translation. It's a culturally sensitive translation. Like that's been done very well. And we're seeing ideas like that then being taken elsewhere where there might be a problem and AI isn't necessarily being used just to do it quicker or do a low grade job. It's helping to finesse it and give us more time on the detail that's to do with those individuals, maybe of a subgroup or someone with a special language or something like that.
I suppose if we think about I think it was 2017, the National Digital Repository of Ireland won. And I think they then won. I think they won twice. They got the overall win. They got a category win, and then the following year they got 2 more at least. So that was a real interesting one because that was something that never existed before. It was just a project, and then it evolved into they got more funding because they won the award, and then of course they became something permanent. But the reason was that the digital repository was incredibly important because we have to somewhere to keep what's going on within our culture. But, what happened, it's all online.
Yeah.
Right? So where's the repository? And I suppose we need to have that sovereignty over our own digital.
It's also then to have, like I said, people having access to this. It doesn't have to be a medical record, your own medical record. It could be something that you share with the rest of the road. And we've seen that the digital repository sort of inspire projects of more local and smaller and niche around the country. But it's that same idea. We should be storing the stories. We need to hold on to the stories. We need to hold on to the languages people had.
Well, then you can talk about the story map.
Yeah.
The story maps that won an award this year, because basically that was the Galway Community Council all coming together and saying, right, let's get local groups, train them how to create story maps about what's going on at heritage of interest in their local area, and then they consolidate the lot together. I mean, that's like a digital repository idea, I suppose.
What it is, it's gathering these little these oral histories, but also it's giving it to the hands of the people who say, this is what's important in this area. And not somebody from outside saying, well, who had the most money or who owned the most land. And it wasn't those stories, because most of the stories handed down are who had the money to have their stories handed down or written for them. These are literally people who were there, the lockkeeper, the person 200 metres up from the lockkeeper who understood other sides of what the canal brought to the area. And now we have them. So they give us a much deeper understanding of what Ireland was then, but also they're not lost. And that's often the thing, that if we don't store, we don't look after the heritage elements, there's a lot going to be lost in the speed of all the sort of e-commerce and online this and online that. You go, hold on, but it's also useful for this. Help us remember.
Yes, not lose things.
Yeah.
And I know that you were talking earlier on about not, if we have a government that's paid for by the public, then not repeating stuff that's already there. And I think really that's when MyGov came into happening, and the Office of the Chief Government CIO. And that's been really, it's been a huge, big revolution really, I suppose, hasn't it?
Well, it is that. It's not sort of using a stick to break down the walls, but actually people seeing that this is what we're here for when we're in the public service. It's to think sort of more fluidly about, say, a life journey of a citizen. They have certain things that happens in their life and they need to constantly interact with government. But it's that person's supposed to centre, instead of you have to bend to the system of public service, as opposed to, it's the big idea of any UX idea that the computer system, whatever system you put together, interface, whatever, bends to the person, not them to it. You don't have to learn a new form and then what's the right day to phone that place and what's the right... No, that's supposed to be happening behind, so you can get on with your big major life event.
Yes. I mean, Barry Lowry, we interviewed him, as you know, on TransformGov, who is the CEO of the OGCIO. And he's wherever they can, they're trying to make sure the projects that are across their desk say, oh, hang on, you don't need that. We've got an SMS service you can use as a central service that any other department can use. Or, if you've got to transact e-commerce or payments, here's another gateway. So that was a big change. And then that knowledge being shared out by the OGCIO and, of course, the LGMA, who are doing the same thing in terms of the local authorities. So, you could see that, could you, coming through in some of the projects?
Oh, bit by bit across the years, yeah. One from collaborating across, but also, if you remember some of the early days, we had Centre of Excellence, where some of the winners would come in and literally give a masterclass and a workshop in this is how we did it. Here were the bumps we hit along the way that we might want to avoid, but here's our approach, and this is what we did.
Yeah, and of course we didn't have podcasts then.
No.
So now we can do it on the podcast where people are sharing their knowledge. But in terms of the National Library's recent work, that's where they're using AI. So we can't not talk about AI. It's been massive, hasn't it?
It has, but I think it's, how would you say, because AI is getting so much, what would you say, all the way to left, all the way to right, all the way up, all the way down. People are thinking this will ruin everything. It's a shortcut. It's dangerous, whatever. For me, the approach is from talking to people and seeing the application that there's a soberness in the application of it. Do you know what I mean? That nobody has handed over everything to the AI to do the big decisions.
No.
It's been treated with a bit of caution, as it should be, because just like the early web, people understood, but they mightn't have seen sort of the unintended consequences 2 or 3 years later of what they've just done. So there's a little bit of cautiousness, but rightly so. But they're engaging with it without sort of fear. So I've seen quite a few people do this sort of little walled projects. See what it's like to tell stories about your community, AI enhanced.
And maybe if you remember, the winner this year was the Dublin City Council, because they've got an AI lab, which is a safe environment to kind of sandbox, try something out, and then the challenge is moving it out of there into real life. Yeah. But there's a lot of that going on.
But that's the clever way to go after it, because it will do things incredibly quickly. How accurately some of them do it is another thing. And then it's also seeing it, that what they were clever about them was they actually included the people who would be affected directly by it. It wasn't just to make the life of a couple of people in the public service a little more efficient. It was actually including people in the communities in those experiments and in those workshops and that would say, this is what it's going to do. To see, okay, I'm supplying a service to you. I'm trying to make your life a bit better, trying to connect up the dots for you. But you know what your life is. I can't tell you that. So by bringing you in and having you part of those sort of sandbox experiments and that, it makes a huge difference.
I think it's going to be a very exciting time now. I mean, over all of the years that we've seen the awards come through and all the different fantastic entries we've had and all the changes in technology, there's something very seismic in terms of AI. And I think the fact that we are part of the EU and have a kind of charged ahead with our own regulations and making sure the humans are in the final loop in terms of decisions is giving people comfort, because they say, right, I know kind of the parameters, relatively speaking, so I think we can do a lot of things. And then combine AI and its capabilities with life events, because we're expecting now, I think it's 11 life events to all be digitized, so that I think that'll just change everything. It'll force, not force, but it kind of enhance collaboration has to be happening. Yeah. Because if you're having a life event like a birth, you've got the health system, you've got the registration of the child, you've got education, all happening around a life event.
There's also the AI, like Ireland has been quite good at recognising, the possible shortcomings and the dangers in that. But also we've got to realise that Ireland was for a long while number 4 in the world.
We were.
For several times this happened.
For digital maturity.
Digital maturity. But that means is this is expertise inside the public service. Okay, not everyone has used AI for 10, 12 years, but thinking about the impacts of making something electronic version or making something a digitized version or automating some system, there's quite a bit of that expertise around. And there's a maturity in seeing what happens. And also there's people now who've been working in these positions for long enough that they can actually, they know when they get up in the morning, they're thinking about the citizen. They're not necessarily thinking about just their small little role.
Yes.
So I think that's quite promising. And although AI is frightening a lot of people, what gets headlines isn't necessarily what will actually happen in a government department. Because I don't think people often get, while there is a lot of innovation, there's a lot of checks. You just aren't given a complete open rein. So you have to justify, think about what you're doing, put a plan together, let people know what's going on beyond just, I need a budget for X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, I think there's loads to go. And look, the important thing is we've seen it just go from strength to strength. Remind everybody that I think in 2025 we had double the number of entries. So it's our biggest ever. The quality is incredible. And I think, and of course, that's going to continue. And also that we're going to be opening up for entry very, very soon. But I think what we really need to do is help people with their entries, because the judges do an amazing job, but let's try and help the applicants. It's a very simple application, but at the same time, what it looks like. So we're going to get back together, I think, Declan, and do that and talk about how we can help people with their applications and make sure it's a very, very simple process. But thank you for joining me on a kind of a nostalgic trip down memory lane, thinking about all the different things we've seen come and go. So thank you so much, Declan.
Okay, thank you.
Well, look, in the meantime, I just have to say goodbye and thank you to some of our team as well. So I'd like to thank our studio manager, Peter Rice, videographer, Neil Horner. Then we have our sound engineer, Lee Brennan, and all of them. Thank you for helping me with Transform Gov, and we look forward to seeing you all on the next episode.